I'm Kathy Hall, President of the Kentucky Nurses Association. On behalf of the Board of Directors of KNA, I would like to welcome our KNA members, other nurses, nursing students, and guests to the 2014 KNA Convention. We hope that you will find these next 2 days engaging and informative, and that you will have the chance to reconnect with old friends and make some new ones along the way. I've been asked to remind everyone that an updated agenda is included in your registration packet. Please consult that agenda for times and places of sessions, meetings, and other activities. We also ask that you support our exhibitors who are located in the room next door, as well as we have a silent auction. Today, we are fortunate to be joined by two very distinguished and accomplished speakers who have both led nursing careers that exemplify the power and importance of nursing leadership and collaboration, both among nursing professionals as well as in the areas of healthcare, public policy, and politics. Our first speaker today is Dr. Susan Jones. Dr. Jones is a professor in the School of Nursing at Western Kentucky University. After 40 years teaching career at WKU, she retired from a full-time faculty teaching position in 2010. She quickly transitioned to a part-time teaching research assignment. She earned her BSN from the University of Tennessee in Memphis, an MSN from Vanderbilt University, and a PhD in nursing from the University of Cincinnati. She holds certification as a nursing educator and is a fellow in the National League for Nursing Academy of Nursing Education. During her tenure in nursing education, Dr. Jones has assumed numerous leadership in professional roles in professional and community organizations, having served as president of both the Kentucky Nurses Association and the Kentucky Board of Nursing. Her research and practice focuses on improving the health and safety of rural populations, including agricultural workers and their families and other vulnerable populations. In collaboration with colleagues, she has implemented numerous service learning projects in rural areas, including an ongoing health promotion project with an old order Mennonite community in South Central Kentucky. In addition, she has organized several study abroad classes, and I want to be one of her students, to Chile, England, Ireland, and Scotland. Throughout her career, Dr. Jones has shared her leadership and collaborative skills as she has worked to build coalitions and partnerships to advance the healthcare of underserved populations. She has engaged students and faculty in these community projects in an effort to maximize the learning opportunities and enrich the lives of rural populations. Please welcome Dr. Susan Jones.
Thank you, Kathy. Is this mic okay? Can you hear me okay? Peggy? Very good. It was only 4 years ago that I stood at this site. I think we were in another hotel, but I was the outgoing president of KNA at the time. And at the end of that meeting, I thought, I will never be at this place again. I was delighted to finish my tenure as president of KNA at the time, but I guess as I told Maggie Miller and some other people that I've seen this afternoon, that it's like an Energizer bunny I am. I keep coming back and back and back, and many of you in the audience are the same way. But it is an honor to be here today. Actually, as I was preparing this presentation, it It gave me the opportunity to reflect on my long career in nursing education and in nursing in general in the profession, to reflect on those people and those events in my life that actually shaped who I am today. And as I share my thoughts, I hope you'll take time, just jot down and think about those people that have influenced your life and determine the actions that you've taken and the people that you've served along the way. The title of the presentation today, I was asked to speak on advancing the health care of underserved populations through leadership and collaboration. The image on this slide actually represents a common denominator of the people that I will be discussing today, and that is rural populations. Those populations that reside in small towns and communities and villages on farms. The objectives for the presentation this afternoon. First, I'll spend a few minutes to identify some of the events and the people that actually shaped my philosophy, my formation of beliefs concerning serving others. We will describe, or I will, 3 interdisciplinary community-based projects that have been implemented in South Central Kentucky to promote the health and safety of underserved population. And then at the end, in summary, discuss the leadership skills that were used to advance the practice or the service to underserved populations. When I reflect on my formation of my philosophy, my philosophical beliefs concerning serving others, I quickly recall, number 1, my rural culture, my mother, 2 memorable walks that I took along the way, and also my tenure as a nursing professor at Western Kentucky University, which for many years was located in a rural area. Rural is often or has been defined in many ways. The U.S. Census Bureau defines urban, and then they describe rural as all populations that are not included in the urban. Words such as low population, sparse population, countryside, landscape, farming landscape are often used to describe rural. The U.S. Census of the U.S. Department of Agriculture actually describes rural as non-metro, rural towns less than 2,500, or other areas with populations less than 50,000. So there's a lot of diversity in how rural is described. It's been said that there's really no reason to describe rural because if you're from a rural area, you actually know it. And some of you can probably identify with that. There has been a lot of research, though. What's the profile of rural people? Generally, we know that these people have an increased distance to their healthcare providers, which is very important when you think about the service to other people. In rural areas, you will also find that there's many connections with people. You have to come from generations of knowing whose uncle is who and whose sister is related to whose brother and so forth. There is usually a town that is the center of activity, the center of trade. Socialization frequently will occur in churches, in schools. There's an economic orientation to the land, to nature, farming, the land, timber. There is also a preference, and this is a point that we can use as we establish relationships with people from rural areas, because there is a preference for interacting with locals, with insiders. And that is a principle that I've used in many of the projects that we have implemented. And I'll talk about that more later. My culture certainly is a rural southern culture. As I grew up on a farm, the closest town was a population of approximately 2,000. My life centered as a young person around my family, my grandparents, church, and school. Anyone that moved into our community, they were viewed as outsiders and a little suspicious until people got to know them. There was a strong sense of community, and if anyone was in need, the community always responded to that need. There is no one, and I have to mention this, that influenced my life more than my mother, and I'm sure that many of you in this room can say the same thing. My mother completed the 8th grade. There was not, during the Depression, there was not enough money to continue to high school. She worked at a print shop, saved her money, went back to high school and graduated. She was actually 4 years older than her classmates, which I think is pretty remarkable. She was a stay-at-home mom until the day I started the first grade, and she started working as a teller at a local bank. She worked her way up. For 50 years, she worked at that bank, and she was a loyal employee and retired after 50 years. And actually, we submitted her letter of resignation the day that I drove her went to the nursing home after I rewrote the letter 3 times. But she was a true role model for me and for many people in the community. She was always the first to respond when someone died or someone had an illness. Her thing was deviled eggs. I cannot tell you how many deviled eggs this lady took to people. She was very active in the community, the Lions Club. She was on the city commission, city council, vice mayor at one time. And she left me with many quotes that I heard over and over and over as a child, and certainly helped shape my desire to serve underserved populations. Some of these quotes are 3 that I would like to share. Number 1, there are 2 things that cannot be taken away from you. That is your education and your reputation. Your education and your reputation. I cannot tell you how many times I heard that as a child and a young adult. Another one is, can't, never, did anything. I'm sure you remember your mom saying these things too. You may fail, but you have no excuse not to try. So can't, did not do anything. And to those that's been given much, much is expected. So there's no doubt that my mom, and I would be amiss if I didn't mention her, instilled in me a desire to serve others through her actions and also through her words. The photograph of my mom in the center, you might guess, the Red Hat Club. I want to digress just a minute and tell you, at her funeral, you can multiply this group about 6, and that's how many people came. They were dressed in their red hats at her funeral, and they took the front of the sanctuary that had been reserved for the mayor and the city council and the bankers, and they would not move. So the funeral director came and said, can you ask them to, and I said, absolutely not, because I knew my mom had some part in that. She probably planned it before. So they kept their place. So 2 memorable walks I want to briefly mention that helped shape my philosophical beliefs of serving others, that is the right thing to do. One occurred in the late 40s. It was Christmas morning. My sister and I both, we had 2 sets of dishes, 2 dolls, 2 everything. She was 2 years older than I. And shortly after we found these gifts under the Christmas tree, my mother announced that she thought that we should share these gifts and we should give half of the things we received, which would still leave us with 1 doll, with the children of the tenant farmer that lived up the holler, so to speak. So she dressed us in warm clothes and we walked and took these Christmas gifts. I never questioned my mom's plan. But to this day, etched in my brain is the memory of those children, because they had no gifts at all. And the giving, it was my first time in my small little world that I realized that there were needy people in my small world. The second walk occurred several years later in obstetrical nursing at the University of Tennessee in Memphis. I was in a rotation in a private hospital. The first week, Elvis Presley's baby was born. So I'm dating myself, I know. The nursing faculty thought that we were getting not getting a very well-rounded view of obstetrics, so they walked us across the street. And during my nursing career as an educator, I frequently thought, I'd like to write an article because I think about that walk. It was a walk that was my first encounter with health disparities as we know them today. It was a walk, my first encounter to injustice. We walked across the street, and it was only a narrow street that separated the rich from the poor, the black from the white, people that had excellent care and health outcomes and state-of-the-art health care, to those people that were at the teaching hospital. And I'll say no more about that. The last thing I want to mention that shaped my philosophy concerning serving others, was my employment that for the long tenure I had at Western Kentucky University, which was located in a rural area. And I realized at the very beginning that that combination of teaching and service and research, that if you could combine those things and get students involved, it certainly would maximize not only their learning, but also the outcome for underserved people. So I have actually today will discuss 3 projects that I've been involved with underserved populations. One being, this is the things I was doing when, in my spare time when I was not active in K&A. Is really my mental health, I guess you might say. The first is the work with agriculture workers and their families, a project with an old order Mennonite community in Allen County, and then a project with rural elders. As I present these projects, you know, if you have a pen or paper, jot down some of the leadership skills that you think you hear, and in the end I will summarize with the skills that were used to accomplish the outcomes with these specific organizations or projects. Agriculture workers, we've known for a number of years that agriculture is a dangerous occupation. Actually vacillated between mining and construction as being the most dangerous occupation. It's the only occupational site that I can think of where the people, family members, they live, they work, and they play at the same site. Every day we know that 38 children are injured in ag-related injuries or ag-related events, and every 3 days a child dies from one of these. In the early 1990s, there was a national movement to address hazards associated with farming. There was a Surgeon General's conference that was held in Des Moines, Iowa. I had the opportunity to attend that to generate strategies of how can we address this severe public health problem. Actually, that was the first Surgeon General's conference held for a public health issue since the lead poisoning back in the 1940s. One of the many initiatives to address the problem was by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. They funded 12 sites nationwide, with each having a different focus to address the issue. For example, the project in New York addressed the stress among dairy farmers. The project in Florida addressed issues concerning migrant workers. Nebraska, there was a project, a Kellogg-funded project that addressed disabilities among farmers. The Kentucky project was awarded to the University of Kentucky, and it focused on farm women as change agents. I received a call one day from Dr. McKnight, who was from the University of Kentucky, asked if I would be involved with the submission of the grant and provide some leadership if funded. I could have said no, but what do you think my mom would have said? So I was taught to explore the unknown, so I said yes, and I could certainly say that affirmative agreeing to be involved with this certainly influenced my professional life. The grant was funded, it was implemented in South Central Kentucky, and I did take a leave of absence for 3 years from teaching to serve as the regional coordinator to implement the grant. In 1993, we created a not-for-profit organization called the Kentucky Partnership for Farm Family Health and Safety. The mission of this organization that is still in existence is to prevent ag injuries and illnesses and fatalities and to promote the health and safety practices among farm families and their communities through advocacy, awareness, education, and services. The partnership, as we commonly refer to this organization, is actually the only Kellogg project of the 12 initial projects that were funded that is still in existence. At the very beginning of when we were thinking about the sustainability of the project, the Kellogg Foundation certainly said from day one, get a plan to sustain the activities after grant funds have been depleted. And we chose the not-for-profit status, the movement, to create a not-for-profit organization Now, I will be the first to admit, if you study coalitions and so forth, that we lost some of the spontaneity of the farm women as change agents when we became incorporated as a not-for-profit organization. Now, over time, the board of directors, and I currently serve as president of that board, it's changed from an all-farm board of directors were all farm women initially when we started, when we were incorporated as an organization. We now have a state representative on our board. We have bankers. We have the director of the South Central Kentucky AHAC, the Rural Institute at Western, many farm women and farmers. And together we have collaborated with many partners within the community to achieve our mission. The major activities of this group that's been in existence now for 20 years. Each year we host an annual meeting, a dinner meeting with auction, and over 150 to 200 farm family members attend that particular event. We also sponsor a Labor Day recognition program each September because there's no one that labors anymore for our food and fiber and the lifestyle that we deserve in farmers. People give donations. We have large sponsors that give $250 for a sixth of a page in our Bowling Green Daily News, and it's all published in the Sunday paper, the Bowling Green paper, the Sunday before Labor Day. So it's called a Labor Day recognition. It's one of the fundraisers for our not-for-profit organization, but it serves another purpose. I cannot tell you the times that I've had primarily women call and say, I really appreciate this. It's given me an opportunity to remember my husband that was killed in a tractor turnover or some type of agricultural event in the past. We also, the third, we do some health promotion activities in the community, or we have partnered with people in the community. For example, one project was a blood pressure screening project that involved collaboration. It was the Kentucky Partnership, faculty in the School of Nursing, and public health students, and also local businesses in the rural community. And when I say local businesses, we identified 10 sites throughout Warren County, 10 country stores, 10 markets, where farmers meet in the morning and they discuss politics, elect the next president, drink their coffee, and it's their gathering site, so to speak. As part of a class project, we took community health students to these country markets. They checked blood pressures. They completed or designed a survey for the farmers to identify the health topic that they wanted to get more information about. And the students went back, prepared an educational brochure, poster, and then took it back to the market. So what they were doing was providing information, what the farmers wanted to know, and they were taking it to them rather than expecting them to come for the education. We felt that this was a very beneficial project. For example, for the farmers, we screened 373 individuals for hypertension, and 1/3 were referred because their values were high. Another advantage for the farmers is they receive their health information in their local area, their gathering site. For the partnership, it was very beneficial thinking about coalitions because it increased the visibility of the organization, and it also supported the mission of the organization. And for the students, it was a grassroots health promotion project, reinforced that development of communication and leadership skills, providing the opportunity for the nursing students to use the nursing process, to do health screening, to use their creativity in designing the poster, and also some critical thinking skills. And of course, for the faculty, it provided the avenue to combine the service in nursing and research and education and scholarship. There is an article published about this particular study or project. It's in Nurse Educator back in 1999. More recently, a partnership that was developed was created with the Rural Institute at Western and the Kentucky Partnership again, and various ag organizations such as Farm Bureau, Southern States, Extension. And this was a project to provide tetanus, to immunize farmers for tetanus in a 10-county area. We used the community-based participatory research model as our framework for this project, and in the end, we immunized 256 farmers in 10 sites, 10 counties. The article concerning this project will be highlighted in the for continuing education in the next journal, the AAOHN Workplace Health and Safety Journal. We've done other health promotion projects with the ag publications, addressing using hearing protection and respiratory protection and so forth. But moving on to another event of this organization, and something that we are involved with, is a Progressive Agricultural Safety Day. We being the Kentucky Partnership, the community-based organization, has actually sponsored this event for 19 years. The national sponsor is the Progressive Agricultural Foundation, and we work with South Central ACAT as another community project or sponsor. We bus in 400 fourth grade students to this event each year, over 400. The event was last week, and I'm still trying to recuperate from it. The students come and they participate in interactive activities or educational sessions on electrical safety. We have sponsors such as the Department of Agriculture. They bring in a tractor rollover display. You may have seen that at the State Fair here in Louisville. The Highway Department, WRECC, and so forth. We have over 130 volunteers, community volunteers at this event. You will see, actually at this event, we use 29 nursing students as group leaders to get exposed to the project. I don't know what the little guys at the bottom are doing, but I'm sure they have something in mind. So we go to the next slide. This is just a group photograph of the event. The poster contest is the last event as far as the ag workers that I wanted to mention. And we use this actually to maximize the experience of the Ag Safety Day. We started this about 4 years ago. Each child that attends Safety Day is given the opportunity to artistically express themselves and to express in a poster the lessons that they've learned. The board of directors, using a predetermined guidelines, we select the top 12 winners. And it's amazing. We use those to create a calendar. These students are invited back to the annual meeting, and we give them cash prizes, and they are delighted, the ones that are chosen to win, that they get their photograph in the calendar, they get their poster in the calendar. So we know, as a result, when you look at the outcome, that there has been a reduction in agricultural entries throughout the last 20 years. Last week, if you followed the news, the Department of Agriculture, Kentucky Department of Agriculture, reported 14 farming-related fatalities in 2013, and that was down from 22 in 2011 and 50 in 1995. And we certainly do not claim the credit for all this reduction as far as fatalities in agriculture, but we think that we've had some small part in the creation of the community-based program and the many activities that's been involved throughout the years. Another outcome is the work of the partnership as an organization. It's providing education for students from a variety of disciplines, and it provided the foundation for scholarly work such as posters and articles and theses and dissertations, and also additional grants. Well, this is my favorite project of all, so I want to make sure you hear it. This project also began kind of totally unplanned. I had 3 nursing students that walked into the office one day, and they had to do a project in their community health course, and they said, "Do you know of an Amish or a Mennonite community that we could visit?" Why they came to me, I don't know. I guess they knew I'm gullible and I'd help them out. But I had been to a community earlier that summer to purchase some grapes with a friend of mine who was an elderly gentleman. And this particular gentleman was known to be an insider to the Mennonite group. Insiders, we can use this, and I'm sure
sure you have in your nursing practice. Insiders to a group contribute to the success often of community projects because they're very familiar with the norms and the values, and they can many times assist insiders to be accepted as credible sources of information. And that's exactly what we did. These three students, and the elderly gentleman, myself, we actually visited the community. He went with me every time we visited the community for probably 2 to 3 years, and I'll never forget the day he told me, you know, you don't need me anymore. They accept you, so you can go on your own. I felt like I had really come of age, so to speak. Just a quick history. Many of you may be very familiar with the Mennonite or the Anabaptist movement. Came out of the Protestant Reformation, separated from the Catholic Church because they believe in total separation of church and state, and that still has some implications in trying to get the health department in the area to give immunizations and so forth. And they also thought that baptism should be limited to adulthood at the age of accountability. So those were primarily the two issues of separation during the Reformation. There were different leaders that occurred. Menno Simon, the people that followed him, became Mennonites. Jacob Ammon, they became Amish. And we know that there are many other orders of Anabaptist orders, the Beachy, the Hutterites, and so forth. But the community that I've worked with for 20 years, for nearly 20 years, it is referred to, they're very conservative. It's an old order Mennonite community, an underserved population. They respectfully refer to themselves as plain people. Some of their basic beliefs, they live a very simple life, and they think that that will bring them closer to God. The men are definitely the head of the household, the head of the church. They're very honest people, live a simplistic life. If I had one word to describe them, it would be their strong sense of community. They do nothing for individual focus, but it's all done for the betterment of the community. They do not bear arms. They are blood donors, though. They have no electricity, but there's a church close by the community, and the Red Cross knows that they'll give blood. So I've been by there many times when the churchyard would be filled with buggies because they give a lot of blood. Other things concerning their community, they have houses that are in good repair, no bathroom. I could digress and tell you many stories about the bathrooms. Some of them are quite humorous. Transportation is horse and buggy. They will use buses for long distances. Probably the highlights of my fall last year was a beautiful fall day, such as yesterday, and I had the opportunity to ride with a colleague of mine in the back of the buggy to another part of the community, going down a windy road with the leaves falling and the warmth of the day, and all you could hear was the clump, clump, clump of the horse. And I remember looking at my friend and saying, it doesn't get much better than this. Their dress is very plain, handmade, mute colors. They have 3 schools in the community, and I've had the opportunity to sit in class. It's fascinating. Their formal education will end at 8th grade. Classes are taught in both English and German. People in the community, their primary occupation is associated with the land. It's agriculture, but they will all have individual trade in addition to that. They may be a mason, they may be a cabinet maker. They have a community store and a lot of markets with produce in the summer. Many herbs and vitamins. One whole wall of their market is filled with herbs and vitamins. I asked them one time, do you people take all of this? And they said, no, but you English people, that's what they call us, you English people do, so you come here and buy. So you think we do, so you come here and buy. Outsiders to this community is a mixed blessing. You know, they like to be separated, but they also like the things that we come and buy when we spend money within the community also. Their leisure activities, they use an oil lamp at night. They do much reading. They write letters. Their letters are absolutely poetic in a way. They will always start with, just rejoice in the beauty of the day. Then they will give you your message, and then they close with a statement similar to their introduction of the letter. Socialization is around church activities and birthdays. There is one lady I wanted to mention that she's 75 and she has 100 grandchildren. And I asked her recently, do you bake a cake for all of those? And she said, oh, Susan, no way. I would be baking a cake every 3 days. So, their health practices are interesting. They're noted for not seeking health care early in the course of an illness. They always desire to know exactly what they can do to help themselves. And I'll talk about educational programs we've done in a minute. That is always a desire. Anytime you're teaching a class, they want to know what can we do to help ourselves. It's not modern medicine. They have a preference for natural remedies. They do not have health insurance, as you and I think of health insurance, but they have worked a contract with Vanderbilt University Hospital and also the Medical Center in Bowling Green for Medicare rates, and they pay cash for their health services. They care for the elderly. There's an elderly couple recently that's been very ill in the community, and families actually rotate couples and go and stay with the elderly person, couple every night. They do not, probably one of the things that I've disagreed most with them is they do not all immunize their children, and that has been a real concern, and we choose to disagree. The projects for the first 6 years working with this community from 95 to 2001, I treaded waters very slowly, and some students just did interesting projects along the way. That first group of students did a project on buggy safety because that's a real hazard if you live in a community where there's a lot of buggies on the highway. And they shared that goal with a local group of English people, not in the Mennonite community. And another student did an elective on the evolution of their health beliefs, and another did an honors thesis on maple syrup urine disease. Probably the highlights of the projects during this period of time, though, was a group of students, and they were actually RN students working on their BSN. And I took them one day to the community, and they initially thought that they wanted to do a project on cancer, and they wanted to do it on breast cancer because they noticed that the contact person that we visited with had had a mastectomy and she did not have a prosthesis, so they determined that they needed information on breast cancer. And by this time, I had a good relationship with a couple of ladies in the community that were my contacts, and they designed their brochure, and it showed the exposed breasts and how to do a breast exam and so forth with graphics and color. And there were 5 of these students. We went back to the community, and they got input from the Mennonite ladies and realized that what they'd done was not appropriate at all. So we went back several times in the updating, and in the end, what they had was a trifold brochure, very small print on every imaginable type of cancer, and no graphics whatsoever with scriptures incorporated. So it was totally different, but it was a wonderful learning opportunity. At the request of leaders in the community, this was in 2001, we began what we refer to as Health Promotion Day or Clinic Day. We call it both things, actually, both titles we've used to describe this. It was a day that was actually, and they requested this, can you come and provide more services? So it gave us an opportunity to present educational material to the Mennonites, and at the same time could have a little primary clinic. We also realized it would be very important for future healthcare providers because it would be a means for them to explore the health beliefs in this culture, and also hopefully help them to increase their awareness of the gain insight into their own attitudes and their beliefs that influence the health care of underserved populations, such as the Mennonite community. We have what we call our monthly schedule for all of these years, last 14, 15 years. I visit the community in between clinic days, 2 weeks in between, to get the topic, because it's a participatory model. They determine what they want their education on. The educational topic is always selected by the members of the community. The AHEC office will mail a postcard each month, and they're to each household in the community, and there are 100 households. The nursing students will rotate with the medical residents in preparing the educational message. Sometimes we will get people from the community with specific expertise. 2 months ago, for example, clinical pharmacists I know did a lecture on antibiotics because they had requested a presentation on antibiotics. And then following the class, the educational topic, we will, actually the medical staff will see patients, and it's in a house, and we will do health screening, glucose, blood pressure, and so forth. You may wonder what kind of educational topics would they like to have more information on. And you can imagine all these years, the number, and I could go on and on. I'm always amazed, though, if you looked at the topics, I would say that they've had more interest in mental health disorders than anything else. The first time they told me they would like a class on defense mechanisms, I first thought they meant biological defenses. I did not realize that they meant rationalization and so forth, but they're very well read. They were very familiar with the defense mechanisms. It's been a real challenge and a learning experience, I think, for students, whether they be residents or nursing students or anyone, preparing these educational sessions and programs and making them culturally sensitive. There's some humor in these. We had a resident one day, and she was talking about first aid for strains and sprains. And she said, well, make sure that you put ice. Well, inappropriate, because they have no ice. They have no electricity, no refrigeration. I think it was the same resident that continued, and she talked about calling 911. They have no telephones. So anytime that you do an educational program, you have to really think, is this culturally sensitive or not? One of the biggest challenges in getting speakers that I have found is the fact that people cannot do a program anymore without PowerPoint. And it's difficult, even though one gentleman that was teaching the class, he was a resident also. He brought his computer. He thought I meant there was just not, a projector. So he brought his computer and pulled it up, and it had a battery run, so he thought that he could use that, and they would gather around and look at the computer screen. As far as preventive care, one of the outcomes in this community, we certainly have seen an increase participation in prevention throughout the years, including their interest in keeping their blood pressure checked. They come for lipid screening, for blood pressure screening, cholesterol, glucose, couldn't think of glucose. They recently requested to have bone density screening, which I thought was interesting. We've been able to get the WKU dental van for dental care, but we still have problems getting immunizations. A few years ago, we were able to get the health department, and the health department's willing to come. You have to think about that separation of church and state. We immunized 30 children out under an oak tree. It was probably one of my biggest days there. I was so excited when I got home. My husband broke my bubble by saying, well, that was just 3 families, and he was exactly right, but it was 3 families. As trust and respect was built within the community, we actually used the community-based participatory research and we've had 5 research studies, and all of these studies have been done at the request of the members in the community, which I find amazing. And you have never had people read your IRB documents like these people do, so you have to allow a long time. And one policy that we have, every study that we've done, we go back and share with the community before we publish or share with anyone else. And they're very interested in finding the results of these studies. So while the projects have been rewarding and certainly have not been without their challenges when you think about working with this type of community. To communicate, I always have to drive to the community, which is 30 minutes away, and then 30 minutes back, which is an hour, and you think, well, that's not so bad, but I'm telling you, these are people that you just don't drop in and leave a message. So there's no sending emails and so forth. Their avoidance of technology certainly remains a challenge to us because we can't do PowerPoints, we can't send email messages and so forth. We have no funds to maintain the project, so it just continues because we think it's the right thing to do in serving an underserved population. There are times, I'll have to admit, that it would be much easier rather than using the participatory model if I could decide what education I thought they needed, but it would not be effective. It would be a lot easier, but I can't say it would be effective. In spite of the challenges, I have to say that I certainly value this relationship that I've developed with the community. We have a true friendship. Together we share a lot of life's events, from births to deaths to new beginnings to closure of relationships and so forth. And I think it's been a good journey for all. These are some of the benefits from the students. They've improved physical assessment, engaged in community-based research. I want to share one quote from the student that they all keep a journal, and this particular one, I'm trying to be more culturally aware, not just of this culture, but of all cultures I come in contact with. It's really made me take a hard look at myself and examine my own stereotypes and prejudices. I realize I have too many, and that's something I'm working on changing. It was something I really wasn't aware of to this experience. It's really opened my eyes. There was one other experience that I'll quickly share with you. It was an RN student, actually, and she wrote in her journal that she could not believe that these people live this way. And then a few weeks later, she shared that she'd been a home health nurse, and she had made many visits throughout her nursing career, and she realized that she had that same mindset with people that she was visiting, questioning why they lived the way they did, and was judgmental about that. So I was very impressed at the insight that she had shared and she had developed. I recently had the opportunity to sit down and discuss the future of this clinic day, or health promotion day as we call it. My primary contact in the community was killed in a buggy accident, and that would be 2 years in January. And we were just not sure exactly where we would go with this effort. Would it continue or would it not? During that discussion, we actually talked very frankly about how the project had continued and why it had continued. And from my perspective, I think having that insider is very beneficial, or has been, to the project. And I also think that having a sincere desire to experience another culture. You know, there's so many people that you have to have the desire or it will never happen. And those are two essential ingredients. Everyone at the table discussing the project, though, agreed that the mutual trust and respect that we had for each other, and also the participatory model, served as the foundation for the relationship and one of the main reasons that it's continued for all these years. We do have an article that was published about this last year. It's a collaborative educational intervention in older Mennonite community, if any of you are interested in reading that. And when we were compiling the results for that article, we estimated that over 600 future healthcare providers, nurses and residents, and students from other disciplines have participated in this project throughout the years. The last project I want to mention, I don't run out of time first, we still have 15 more minutes, is that right, or a little bit more, was a health literacy project. And this happened in the early 2000s. I was fortunate to obtain a grant to focus on health literacy and rural elders. The project, again, was somewhat unplanned, so I hope you remember that, unplanned. At the time, I was very busy assisting some relatives that were elderly trying to navigate the healthcare system. Very frustrated, I wrote a white paper, and needless to say, we addressed health literacy and what we might do, and I must have put my heart and soul in it because it got somewhere and it was funded. So I think health literacy is, it was, and it still continues to be a major health concern. It's directly related, we know, to health outcomes, to length and frequency of hospitalization, also healthcare expenditures. You may wonder, well, why do we focus on health elders? Well, 14% of the Kentucky population at that time were rural elders, and when you compare them to urban elders, they were at risk for being underinsured, they have less resources, poor perception of their health status, and they were more likely to have chronic disease. Barriers, the rural elders also faced unique barriers to health care. They had limited health care providers in rural areas, and that still exists today. Lack of public transportation is another problem in rural areas to get the people with these chronic conditions to their health care providers, and there's a long distance to their health care providers. And many times they lack information and knowledge about what are the available resources out there and how can they access those resources. The conceptual framework for the project was grounded in the empowerment theory, that rural elders can be empowered to have better health outcomes through increased health literacy and knowledge. The grant was called the Health Enhancement for Rural Elders. We called it the HERE project. It was funded by the Office of Rural Health Policy. It used an interdisciplinary approach. We had faculty and students from the disciplines of public health and social work and nursing that worked together in an attempt to maximize rural elders, maximize their use of the healthcare system. The HERE project was funded for 3 years. We targeted 2 counties in south central Kentucky, Butler County and Edmonson County, and the counties, as far as demographics, were very similar: population, education. The components of the project, we did detailed resource guides with information on how to access these resources. We developed those for each county. Another component was the design of 4 educational modules, and these included medical terminology, basic anatomy and physiology, advanced directives, and pharmacology. These were the areas that we thought the education our intervention. 10 students were actually recruited. Maybe you can hear me for the first time. We recruited 10 students from nursing, social work, and public health, and they enrolled in an independent study, and they helped develop these resource materials. We did use an expert consultant with each group, and they presented their materials back to faculty. We had great plans for this. Research study. We had control. One county was the control county. We had an intervention, and we planned to use rural churches for the intervention sites. Well, I'm telling you, rural churches have the doors closed from Sunday until the following Sunday. So we had great difficulty. I can tell you wherever rural church is in Butler County, though. So my point is sometimes the best of plans do not materialize. In the end, at the end of year 2, we found no statistical significant differences between the intervention and the control groups. The sample size was so small that any type of findings would not mean anything. We did learn some things, though, from the project. Number 1 was that most rural elders reported their health care providers. They loved their health care providers, and they reported them to be good communicators. However, they also reported that their health care providers did not check to see if they understood information or any of the directions that were given. A few of the elders said that they would ask any questions because they expected their health care provider to tell them what they thought they needed to know. It's not surprising, too, that 69% were confused by medical forms, entrance forms, and a large percentage reported anxiety and being nervous when they visited their healthcare provider. And we know that often when anxiety is increased, perception is distorted. So what we did at the end of year 2 is we revamped the whole study, the whole project. We sought information from a team of rural elders. We went to the rural elders, to the insiders again, trying to maximize, what can we do to maximize this and deliver the information that we've collected to the largest number of rural elders in these 2 counties. We did identify sites that we presented the information to, larger groups of people in libraries and senior centers and assisted living areas and medical clinics. We also had a group of graduate students that took the educational materials and converted to PSAs, to videos, and to brochures. And actually we did a mass dissemination of all this material. In the end, we had 32 graduate students that actually worked on the project, and we felt much better about the outcome of this because we were able to reach more rural elders than sticking with the research plan. So, in closing, these are our three projects that we've been involved with in South Central Kentucky. 3 different projects, but all designed to serve to meet some healthcare needs of underserved populations. So what lessons have we learned from these projects? First, I would say, and I know there's some students in the crowd, in the audience, but don't be afraid, or if you're a junior faculty, don't be afraid of stepping out of your comfort zone. Take advantage of opportunities that come your way. You know, really think about those times you say, I don't have time for this, and because it could turn out to be a wonderful project. In fact, all 3 of these projects that I've discussed in many ways were unplanned, and perhaps they didn't develop as we had first envisioned them to develop. But they all 3 provided some healthcare information and service to underserved population groups. I think it's also important that we build partnerships and coalitions, as nothing can be accomplished from working when you work by yourself, and particularly in rural areas where resources are so limited. The best partners are those that share common visions, that the outcome is one that's desired by all players. So we need to maximize all of our experiences. I think the partners too, we must include the underserved as our partners. And I think I alluded to that several times, how important it is to get the perspective of the people that we are attempting to serve. It's much easier to have a grassroots approach when people from the bottom are planning the health intervention or whatever intervention it is, rather than having that top-down approach, a basic lesson in coalition building. I've mentioned many times interdisciplinary, and I realize that the term is changing. Now we have interprofessionalism and so forth. But my point is that nursing needs to embrace, reach out, and problem solve, working with disciplines or different professions, that we do not always have the answers. I think it's also important that we not overlook the empowerment theory when working with the underserved. Empowerment is the foundation of the participatory model. It was used with the agricultural workers. It was used in the Mennonite community. It was also used in the Rural Elder Project. This approach actually assumes that participants can determine their own needs. They can determine their own priorities. But we must be willing to listen to these people, listen to their stories and what they have to share. We must be willing to dialogue with them. There are times that we need to step to the plate and perhaps share resources, assistance when needed, but allow these individuals to share and solve their own problems. Collaboration, I think, was an essential ingredient or tool that was used with all the projects. And true collaboration, I think, occurs when It's built on that respect, that trust between groups. When you're willing to learn together, when you're willing to work together, you can learn from each other. You have to practice open communication and value the unique contributions of all partners. Working with the underserved requires flexibility and also adaptability. A little of the work that was done with the groups that I mentioned occurred from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. And this is one of the limited things that sometimes occurs. But we were out at the country stores at 6 a.m. meeting with the farmers. We may be given a tetanus immunization at night at a Farm Bureau meeting. So the point being, I think many times that underserved populations are not available just 8 or 4, but we have to have the flexibility to reach out to their schedule. Everything will not work out as planned in all the projects. We have to be willing to listen to it and make some lemonade along the way. If we hadn't rethought the research study that did not work with the rural elders, it could just be a report that was sitting on the shelf. But we were able to step back and revamp and move on to another level. I think in closing, I'd like to say that I hope that all of you, when you serve and you all serve in many ways, that you will have some fun along the way and celebrate your accomplishments, share credit with partners for the achievement of all goals, be reluctant to place blame when things do not go as well as you had intended or they do not progress as planned. So just keep smiling and enjoy the journey while serving others. And hopefully, I think you will have fun along the way. So thank you so much. I am open. You can go, there's some references, and at the very end, I think there's 3 pages. I'm not sure, 3 slides. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to entertain any questions.
Susan, how long did it take for you to establish trust with the Mennonite community? Was there a trust issue?
Oh, definitely there was a trust issue, and I would say it was 2 or 3 years before I really felt, there was a time commitment. The one contact that I had that was unfortunate with the Bunny situation, she was actually an RN at one time. She had gone to a diploma school of nursing in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Grew up in an old Amish order and converted to the old order Mennonite. So she came with that basic understanding, even though she still did not have a nursing license. I mean, she did not practice nursing per se, but she had that educational background. Other questions? Yes, Linda.
You talked about that they read a great deal. Without TV and using that center country store, how did word travel? Did you find them just mainly concerned with what was going on within the community and not knowing much about the world?
You mean the Mennonites?
Uh-huh.
No, I've accused the Mennonites of having a computer in their basement. They're the most well-read people. I don't know how they find out things as fast as they do. It's amazing to me. But the one thing that they really excel in is geography. They are so well-read. You can mention any city in the world, and they can tell you if it's north or south or east or west. I mean, geographically, they are very, very well-read. Read a lot of history books and so forth. They have conversation. I'm not sure I mentioned that, but I don't think I've ever, a few places I go in this day and age that you can sit and actually connect with someone and have a true conversation because you don't have distractions. There's no beeps and horns and phones going off and checking your email and so forth. And it was several years before I got my husband to go with me, and we stopped by there. It was actually on New Year's Eve, and We had such a wonderful visit. It was an oil lamp and just sitting and talking to this couple. But before we realized it was late in the evening, we missed our New Year's Eve party. It was okay. We had fun. Anything else?
Susan,
Yes.
you're talking about the Mennonites, this probably none, but I don't need.
That's okay. You don't need
I
it.
just bought a dog. I know this has nothing to do with it, but it does. I just bought a puppy from the Mennonites in Casey County. And they send their dogs, their lasses and their hearts of fire, they send their dogs everywhere. Rhode Island, they take them to the airport. They have a computer website. So when I listen to what you were saying, I mean, and they have a professional photographer who takes pictures of these dogs.
Right.
And so,
Well,
and
that
they have a
obviously is.
phone, they have a phone, because I call them up.
Well, I'm sure, but you know, when I started initially, I said the community I work with is a very orthodox, old order. They are the most conservative. That's why they're called plain people. Yes, there are some situations in which the people are very progressive, and they do have modern conveniences. There seems to be a lot of variation too. I think it was Casey County. I visited a family there because I had a former student that had left, and she wanted me to go back and visit her mother a couple years ago. And they used air pressure to run their sewing machines, but they didn't have electricity in the home. So you're going to see a lot of variations within the orders. But thanks for sharing that. Every 2 years, there is a conference in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I've presented there before, where different Anabaptist studies affecting Anabaptist communities. And there is a gentleman by the name of Dr. Holmes Morton. If you ever have an opportunity to just Google him, he is a physician, he's a pediatrician, and he started a genetic clinic outside of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, because there's a lot of genetic disorders among these children. And it's amazing what the man has accomplished. It's called the Special Needs, I think, Clinic, and Holmes Morton. It's interesting gentleman. Thank you so much.